Thor's had a really rough time in the MCU, whether it was the literal destruction of Asgard, the death of his family, or the more controversial choices made behind the scenes. Thor desperately needs some TLC. With Thor 5 inevitably on the horizon, I've started to wonder, well, what's that film gonna look like? Thor has constantly seen new directors each film, and with the exception being Love and Thunder, which caused a ruckus amongst the fandom for being a Flanderization of the character.
My fellow Asgardians, we will return with children, and then we shall feast. Not on the children. Do not do that anymore. It's the dark times. Okay, we should go.
I think it's time the Thor franchise injects some new blood again. Hi, I'm your host Rob, and on this episode of Atomic Vision, I'm going to theorize and predict Thor 5. And before I do, I'm going to break this down into 5 chapters so you can watch this in your preferred way. First things first, we gotta address the big Secret Wars elephant in the room. Because the 2 Avengers films are being fast-tracked at Marvel Studios.
Don't just stand there, you ape. Give me a hand up. Nope, I'm actually okay. Thank you very much.
I have to assume Thor 5 will be released after the multiverse saga ends. Because of this, for the sake of this video, we're gonna assume Thor lives to see his 5th film. The next issue is the Love and Thunder problem. I'll admit that I personally love that film, but I'm also not gonna deny that it has some major problems. The himbification of Thor went a little bit too far, and the tonal whiplash of Gore and Jane's storyline didn't mix well with Thor being Thor.
Human handshake, the Asgardian shake, into the snake that you cannot trust.
Really dragging this out.
So I totally understand the backlash. For this video, I'm gonna guess that Taika Waititi will not return to direct Thor 5. Marvel Studios has a really interesting pattern where if a director's Marvel film scores lower than 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, then they aren't asked to return for future Marvel projects. With Thor Love and Thunder critically dwindling the franchise to its lowest score to date, I think Feige and friends will probably hire a new director. And the last issue. Will Marvel continue the storyline set up in Love and Thunder? Marvel Studios has repeatedly set up potential sequels in their films, but there have been many cases where these ideas are either dropped, or they resurface years later in a random movie or show. For this video, just to make things easier, I'm gonna assume that yes, Marvel will pay off the Love and Thunder sequel setups, but for extra fun, I bet it will be done in the most unexpected way. Alright, with all of that being said, let's pick out our new tone for the franchise. The Thor franchise never likes to stay in one style for too long, and is constantly reshaping itself based on the director who is making the film. So why break tradition? Since a lot of people found Thor Love and Thunder too silly, I'm expecting Thor 5 to have a bit of a grittier approach. Now I'm not saying that it won't be fun or humorous, because this is Marvel after all, but I bet they're gonna tone it down quite a lot this time around. So for my version of Thor 5, I'd have it resemble the recent God of War games. Lean into the fantastical elements of Thor's mythology, but treat it with a little bit more seriousness. Now obviously the film won't be rated R, because duh, but I think God of War 2018 and Ragnarok 2022 did a great job of balancing humor, whimsy, and drama incredibly well. So I think Thor deserves the same level of treatment.
First, you need to cut off my head.
Wait, what?
Now that we got a tone picked out, who should be the director? Because this is Marvel Studios, this could go either way. They love to hire up-and-coming directors with very little experience, but lately, that has bitten them a lot more than in the past. So to narrow it down, I'll make 3 broad guesses. By keeping Marvel Studios' tradition going, my first choice will be a rather unknown director, and it's Michael Sarnowski. Since Marvel Studios does a lot of research and watches a load of indie films, I have to guess that Feige and friends have watched Michael's directorial debut, Pig, starring Nick Cage. If you have no clue what movie I'm talking about, then that's the point. When Marvel hired director John Watts to make 3 Spidey films, I can bet only a handful of you have watched his other films like Clown or Cop Car. So if Marvel wanted to keep this tradition going, Michael Sarnowski seems like a great pick. Pig is an excellent character study that subverts expectations by flipping revenge thriller tropes on their head. The trailer sold itself like a gritty John Wick-esque revenge plot, when in reality, the film is an intelligent breakdown of the human experience, especially about grief and privilege. So I think Michael's excellent writing and directing could definitely bring some much needed gravitas to Thor, who's still a bit, you know. With Michael's newest film being a prequel to A Quiet Place, and his future follow-up gig being a gritty A24 reboot of Robin Hood starring Hugh Jackman, I think Michael could realistically direct Thor 5 after that. But maybe this guess is too risky, or Michael is too busy, so maybe Marvel Studios wants a Hollywood director with an even bigger blockbuster experience who's also available. My second choice is someone who has directed the biggest monkey in all of cinema and is also a Marvel fan, so he could easily show up to take a crack at his own version of Thor, and it's director Jordan Vogt-Roberts. Jordan's last film was Kong Skull Island back in 2017, and since then he's... Actually, what has he directed since Kong? Well, he almost directed Metal Gear Solid starring Oscar Isaac as Snake, which sounds awesome, but that film has been stuck in development hell since 2014. Okay, that's unfortunate, but after that it was announced that he would be making a live-action Gundam movie for Legendary. But the project was announced in 2021, and that was 3 years ago as of this video. I guess it's stuck in development hell too. Well, Jordan has kept himself busy in the meantime by directing multiple commercials for video games like Destiny 2, PUBG. Do people still play that? But his coolest ad is the main reason why I chose him as Thor 5's director, and it's when he directed the Earth's Mightiest Heroes in a commercial for Avengers, the video game.
Oh, sorry I'm late.
With all this stuff laid out like this, I think I can confirm that Jordan might be accursed. In this hypothetical, the idea of Jordan directing Thor with the same visual flair as Kong sounds exactly like what fans want right now. Whenever people bring up the coolest Thor moments, the top spot is usually Thor arriving in Wakanda, which to me shows the scale of Thor's power. So having an anime nerd like Jordan Vogt-Roberts directing Thor like he's an OP electrified Kratos, that just sounds like a dream come true. The only aspect that's truly holding Jordan back from being Marvel's top choice in my eyes is that allegedly, a lot of the behind the scenes problems have occurred under Jordan's watch when making Kong Skull Island. Sometimes throwing an inexperienced director into the deep end of Hollywood's pool isn't always the best idea, and I read that Kong was an extremely hard film to make. Even then, Marvel has managed to revive directors' careers before, like the Russos, and I can definitely see a world where Jordan Vogt-Roberts makes a Marvel film to break out of the rut he's currently stuck in. But my last pick for director is someone who's a Hollywood icon, who deserves a box office win, but might also be a bit too big for Marvel Studios. Even then, the potential for him to actually take the job seems likelier than ever before, and it's George Miller. The Mad Max director just released his latest film, Furiosa, to critical acclaim, and has continued to showcase that despite his age, he's one of the most metal directors to have ever lived. What makes George Miller a possible candidate is the fact that Chris Hemsworth starred in Furiosa as Dementis and has built a sweet friendship with the director. Most recently, George Miller was asked about the potential of working for Marvel, and he said he'd do anything to get to work with Chris again. Normally this would sound like PR, but with Chris Hemsworth being up to executive producer for the Thor franchise, it's quite possible that this could realistically work out for George Miller. He could be Thor 5's director. With Furiosa underperforming at the box office, having George Miller sign up to make a Marvel film seems like a wise career choice, albeit a bit of a depressing one. It's a shame films are flopping hard this year, but this opportunity could be the perfect runway to have an auteur work for Marvel Studios as the company's looking to revitalize their franchises for modern audiences. People have gotten tired of the same old formula, and if there's one thing to say about George Miller's style, it's anything but ordinary. His visual style is one of the most unique in all of Hollywood, and imagining what a Thor film could look like under his control is too good to ignore. With 3 directors picked, let's move on and talk about what should be Thor's character arc in his 5th film. Each Thor film sees the Marvel hero having some sort of existential crisis, and it doesn't make sense to break away from that now, as the character's evolution continues to grow. The first film in 2011 was about Thor's entitlement and learning to humble himself for once. Thor: The Dark World, in my opinion, has Thor's worst character journey as he grapples with his responsibility of being the future king of Asgard while dealing with Jane's ether problem and the death of his mother Frigga. In my eyes, this story barely focuses on Thor's personal journey. This film should have focused more on the awful relationship he had with Loki and the aftermath of Avengers 2012. But thankfully this was fully realized in Thor Ragnarok. Speaking of, the Taika Waititi film saw Thor realizing he's more than just his hammer, and from that disconnect, he learns that what he calls home isn't a specific place, but the people around him. Thor: Love and Thunder, while thematically a mess, does feature a character journey I enjoyed, and it was Thor having to confront mortality, which is the one thing that has been haunting him since Thor: The Dark World and Avengers: Infinity War. Despite being a god himself, death comes for us all, including the ones we love. I just wish the film handled it better, but hey, at least it has some type of depth, unlike Thor the Dark Thor.
Sorry about that time I turned you into a frog. It was a wonderful joke.
It was indeed hilarious.
For Thor 5, much like the God of War references I made earlier, it should be about his new fatherly duties and caring relationship with his adoptive daughter, Love. I know that Marvel has gotten a reputation for having so many stories about daddy issues, but I think this would be a great way to flip it around.
We got Tony Stark, daddy issues.
Jen.
Thor, daddy issues. Loki, same daddy, same issues.
Oh boy.
Star-Lord, 2 daddies, 2 issues.
Jen, please stop.
Oh, and when are we getting the X-Men?
The only superhero that's a genuinely good father in the MCU is Scott Lang, Ant-Man, and his third film completely ditched what could have been an easy father-daughter storyline in favor of Kang. By making Thor 5 about fatherhood, it gives Marvel Studios a great excuse to finally mature the character and move away from his over-the-top goofiness, while not completely abandoning the setup that they had made in the previous film. The film could deal with how hard it is to be a dad, especially to a powerful being like Love, and it could act as an introspective and thematic flip to the original film, where Odin was a terrible father to Thor and Loki. That way you can have some great character motivation for Thor that also feels earned and full circle.
Do you think those two will ever hold hands over a hot lava pool and make a Thor baby?
It's unlikely, sadly.
That's too bad. I think Thor would make a great dad.
With Thor and Love's character work out of the way, who should be the villain of Thor 5? If I had to guess, Marvel will likely own up to their setups by paying off the Thor vs. Hercules storyline from the Love and Thunder end credit scene. But honestly, he also shouldn't be the ultimate villain. With Zeus still alive at the end of Love and Thunder, I wouldn't be surprised if he sent more assassins than just Hercules to kill Thor. So the villain should be multiple characters who either meet their demise bit by bit, or are somewhat redeemed. My list of bad guys includes Hercules, Ulik, and Magog. And yeah, I know that some of these villains are really obscure Marvel characters, but maybe some could be swapped out with some Greek mythological monsters, like a Minotaur, a Cyclops, or a Cerberus. But if that's too small, you could also beef up the roster by adding more Olympic gods like Hades and Medusa. Ultimately, the big bad of the story should be Zeus and Ares, who, quick refresher, are Hercules' father and big brother. Now, why Ares? Well, besides being a cool bad guy who's literally the god of war in Greek mythology, there's also some prime real estate here to flesh out these characters in a way that is a bit meta and poetic. If I were Marvel, I think the wisest thing to do is to reflect on how much Thor has changed as a person and have that be the driving force of the movie. As fans, we forget that our characters are meant to change and evolve with each and every story. Thor has been in the MCU for 13 years now, and by the time this 5th film releases, it'll be over 15 years or more. That's a long time, and with so much history there, it only makes sense that a 5th film reflects on Thor's life as a whole. And the best way to do that is by turning the tables and putting Hercules and Ares in the same position as Thor and Loki in the 2011 film. Zeus is not a good dad, obviously. And by pitting his sons to be the best champion of Olympus, it's pretty much the same parental abuse Odin had forced upon Thor and Loki. Ares and Hercules should be fueled by their desire to make their father proud, but in the process, you have them confront the damage they are causing to appease their abusive father. I'd put both Hercules and Ares in questionable situations where they have to choose between vengeance or self-actualization. I think this movie could be a great way to confront Odin's past failures like Loki and Hela, or whatever the hell's going on at Balder the Brave, by forcing Zeus to see the damage he's causing to his own kids. Whether these antagonists live or die, that's decided by whatever avenue Marvel wants to take. But in the end, much like Thor being a father to Love, this film should be an introspective look at fatherhood and the kind of person we want our children to be. And despite whatever upbringing you've experienced in your own life, the answer, regardless of the abuse, the heartbreak, and the many losses we experience in life, the ultimate goal we should all strive toward when being a parent is to have our kids live a life that's better than ours. And that is what Thor 5 should be about. Oh, and Beta Ray Bill should finally show up. Feige, just give me my scary horse god already. But what do you think? Does my pitch for Thor 5 sound a bit too much like Clash of the Titans? Is it too basic? Or do you think there's an iconic storyline Marvel should adapt instead? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Atomic Vision, leave a like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.
You're a vain, greedy,
Cool boy! I beg to differ, Father. Here, have some candy. Hey!